Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Aaron Smith with EBA, and welcome to the EBA webinar podcast series. We're here today to talk about building for better air, and we're joined by Ryan Ritchie and Brian Hicks with Healthway. If you didn't get a chance to see Healthway the last couple of years at the EBA Summit or online, really a great product. Really excited to have them here today. Um, and I think that you'll probably be like me and come away from today with why isn't everyone doing this, or why aren't I doing more around this category? Standard rules apply today. Put your questions in the Q&A, put your questions in the chat. I will present those to Ryan and Brian as we go through today's presentation. And with that, Brian and Ryan, welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having us today. Great to see everybody. Look forward to sharing a little bit about indoor air quality today.
Awesome.
Aaron, you want us to just hop right into it?
Yeah, dive in.
Okay. We'll hop right into the presentation. If you can kind of cue us up with any questions that come along.
Sure, will do.
Ryan, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, sure. So Healthway is an air purification manufacturer. We've been in the industry for well over 30 years. And during that time, we've seen a lot of transitions in different vertical markets. And today we want to really help highlight the idea of building for better air. It always starts at the home construction. The best solutions can be applied at that time. So in our perspective, to hit it at that early stage and to build the structure designed for better indoor air quality is the best approach in improving indoor air quality for the masses. As mentioning that we've been in this industry for well over 30 years, it's allowed us the opportunity to work with almost every known technology in air purification known today. Now, I would like to say that each technology has its place and its value, as well as its deficiencies and drawbacks. And it's this evolution of working and building these different solutions that we've got to the point we are today, and what we think are some of the best solutions to improving indoor air quality. So from residential to commercial, and everything in between, we have provided solutions to improve indoor air quality with the host of different types of technologies over the years. So when you really look at the indoor environment, what we come across are three main indoor air contaminants. These are particulates, gases, and microorganisms. Now, these three different classifications can be found in almost every environment inside the home, from the living room to the basement to the bathroom to the bedroom. And so each of these, again, contaminants have different implications on our health and can be produced and identified in multitudes of different locations in the home. Now, indoor air is up to 2 to 5 times and oftentimes 100 times worse than outdoor air. And since we breathe 22,000 breaths a day, over 11,000 liters of air inside of our body, it stands to reason that the contaminants in the air can have a dramatic impact. Now, because of this COVID thing we had a few years ago, we had about 20 years of awareness condensed into 2 years. So the level of awareness and understanding of the impacts that air quality has is at an all-time high, which is leading to consumer demand for such solutions. It's an analogy I like to use is that for the longest time we were pushing a rope, and now it's like drinking from a fire hose. It is not trying to showcase and help a consumer understand the importance, but help them identify the best approach. So the health and wellness is really where we see this movement of indoor quality and finding solutions to improve our well-being land the most. And buyers are identifying builders that are helping not just build an aesthetically beautiful home or a high-performing home, but a home that will help their wellness and the longevity of the occupants indoors. Aaron said something that kind of stuck with me of HVAC, heating and cooling not really ventilation, right? We find that most HVAC companies are addressing the temperature control in the space, but when it comes to air quality or improving the indoor quality in a space, it's typically left to the consumer to find and identify what to do. This indoor air quality movement, of course, in providing better solutions for indoor air quality enhancement, lead to also better performance, not just us as an occupant, but also of our equipment from our cooling solutions, the coil cleaning components, clogged filters, what lead to costly callbacks. And again, this leads to a longevity and protection of some of our most valuable assets, like our HVAC system that we put into the home, oftentimes extending the life because you do not have buildup of the debris that indoor air quality can lead to in an indoor environment.
Yeah, and Ryan, I think a big point to hit on there is, code is lagging what consumers are demanding. And we hear a lot about return to work. So people want to make sure that the place they work is healthy. You go to the doctor's office, you want to make sure you're protected. In schools, they've taken a lot of steps to address indoor air quality. But if we build the code, a lot of times it's not meeting what consumer demand is actually, seeing. In the current state, from a home building perspective, I think what we're finding is right now differentiation is going to be critical, and we think giving the consumers what they actually want is obviously a large portion of that. So a couple interesting stats here, knowing that a large portion of the audience is on the home building side. If we think about 1 million homes being built on the single family side each year, we have roughly 400,000 people competing for that business. So a lot of homes being built. It's a relatively crowded space. And for a while, we've seen a nice little run on demand, new home starts, et cetera. I'd like to think we've all benefited from that over the last, 5 to 10 years. In the current state, we're dealing with high mortgage rates, declining consumer confidence. We're hearing a little bit about that coming out of the builder side. And then tariffs are obviously adding a little bit of complexity, which may hit, supply chain interruptions, at some point. All the things that we're used to kind of dealing through, but it does give us a time to kind of think, pause, and pivot to how we're going to react. So a normal response might be, hey, let's drop price. Are we going to leverage rate buy downs? Are we going to work on getting additional feet on the street, et cetera? Or we can pivot to differentiation, which is obviously what we hope to spend a little bit of our time on today, is how do we capture through differentiation to pivot to what we're seeing in today's economy to help us build forward? And, being part of EEBA, dealing with performance products, obviously this is the type of audience that we deal quite well with, and we believe indoor air quality can be a large portion of that discussion. So in the past 4 months, we've put together our own survey of home builders, just kind of go along with one of our new product launches. What we found is that 3/4 of the home builders that we interviewed, and this was a mix from small to medium and large builders across the continental US, they 3/4 of them are seeing their competition promoting healthy home solutions. That's great from an indoor air quality perspective because we see that as an opportunity. From a home builder perspective, if you're not doing that, obviously it might be information that you'd want to incorporate and try to flood in. As a filtration manufacturer, what we found was quite surprising is that despite 3/4 of the people that we interviewed doing and promoting healthy home solutions, 70% of them are still using standard home filtration. So for us, we see that as a huge opportunity for us as a company, but also to help home builders in the space differentiate their own offering. So as we get into what would I do for a healthy home package? A lot of times you hear about air quality, you hear about water treatment, you hear about ventilation. It's simple on the surface. However, there's a lot of ways to actually approach the problem. Ryan, maybe you can kind of help me talk about the different approaches on air quality specifically and kind of explain what the trade-offs might be.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we have been blessed to get to leverage these different technologies over the years. And again, we understand each of them have its specific value and benefit. And you really look at three different buckets of solutions today. There's additive, meaning technologies that add something into the space that have a desired impact. Ionization, ozone, UV, these are some of those technologies. Then there's dilutive, that is designed to dilute the air, which is one of the main recommendations of the EPA to improve indoor air quality. These are HRVs, ERVs, fresh air ventilation. And then reductive technologies that are designed to permanently remove the contaminants found indoors. And as we talked about those three pollution categories earlier, from particulates that include ultrafine, microorganisms and molds, things of that nature, and then VOCs or odor removal, you can kind of start to see where the green, red and yellow lights go to see the value proposition that these different technologies do benefit from. Now, this is a very vague overshot of the technology as a whole. We understand that manufacturers all have different claims and value propositions on what their specific product can do. But typically, these are the buckets and the value proposition that those different solutions provide.
Yeah. And, obviously we lean quite heavily on the reductive side of things. The large majority of our products and solutions lean towards there's something in the air. How do we pull it out? And within that space, there's large things, small things, there's microorganisms and gases. And that's where you get into the very specific details of technology and approach, which we'll share more about here later
Yeah.
on.
Can I ask a quick question there, Ryan?
Sure.
We have an ozone warning here today, and it feels like more and more from Minneapolis, but Denver has them all the time, it seems like. But how does that fit in those different buckets? And is that something that's addressable within a high performance home?
Yeah, really great question, and not one often asked enough. Now, we are familiar with ozone as a product that can put ozone into a space for a desired odor reduction or decontamination application. But we also know that ozone is a lung irritant. Now,
Hmm.
we have natural ozone, ground level ozone that you're referencing, that's part of the
Hmm.
AQI or the air quality index, which is an important note to make. Every weather channel, weather app you go to now is going to highlight the AQI of outdoor air, good, bad, and different. Should you open up doors and windows on these days? Should you go running? Should you have an ozone concern? Now, the bigger concern with ozone as it lays is that ozone is a O3 molecule that changes the molecular structure of the contaminants it interacts with. For example, if you have certain cleaning agents and toluene or formaldehyde in your space, which most homes do, ozone reacts to that and creates a third category of a very active VOC. So it's not
Mm.
ozone by itself necessarily, and then also VOCs by itself, but
Mm.
that interaction. And that goes for both indoors and outdoors, which is why they give a high ozone alert level, because that ground
Yeah.
level ozone is at a dangerous level. Great
Yeah.
question.
Um, I think one other question too is, you're exactly right. I was checking there's my phone, but I'm checking my outdoor air quality levels today. And then some of us are starting to add indoor air quality sensors to our house. I think, there's some things on this list we can see on those indoor air quality sensors. Can you just talk through that? I mean, is that
Yeah.
helping kind of raise the bar? I know.
I think there's a good and bad. Aaron, I could
Okay.
speak on this topic all day.
Yeah.
My big hairy goal in the industry is to address this. The
Yeah.
AQI, the air quality index on your phone on the weather channel, was built in the 1980s for outdoor air contaminants, specifically particulate matter or PM 2.5. Because
Mm.
there is a lack of indoor air quality guidance, the monitors we commonly see on Amazon, Home Depot, et cetera, today are still leveraging the outdoor AQI index for an indoor application. So those
Okay.
sensors and their capability is very, very limited. And as
Mhm.
we're going to discuss, and what we can certainly highlight at a later time, is when you look at this scale here from a human hair down to a coronavirus in size, size does matter. The reason it matters is because after PM 2.5, the ultrafine particles are able to enter our bloodstream and therefore impact our brain, our heart, and even babies in the womb. We have a whole nother presentation we do on the health implications of air quality. And not only is it responsible for over a quarter of the deaths from stroke, from heart disease, et cetera, but a host of other issues that are being studied and really understood today. So the current AQI, if I have one of those in my home, it's going to say it's okay because it's only measuring 2.5 and above.
Okay.
So one last analogy, and I know again, Brian's like, stop, you're going off on a tangent. Is for every the larger particulates 2.5 and above are measured on weight. When you look at everything below 2.5, you could have a million particles, but the weight doesn't equal enough to be calculated. So it doesn't mean those contaminants aren't there. It just means the mechanism to measure it is not sustainable or capable of looking at that. So as you'll see, and as we discuss, our focus point is always on the ultrafine particles, the most damaging to our health, the most difficult to capture, and the ones that are not being accounted for in the AQI.
Great. Thank you.
And Aaron, when we talk about training new partners, when we talk about making the invisible visible, we come back to that comment about code and regulation. So there's not a large amount of guidance on what indoor air quality should be. It'd be more self-selected standards that are being adopted by a Class A office space or a high-end home, where it does get measured. One of the few places that I've been into, well, there's two. Two will tell me what their air quality count at 0.3 is: a clean room, an infection control team, and a healthcare facility. Those are the two people that are actually measuring it. So that's always music to our ears because that's where we measure to. The absence of the actual standard and the complexity of being able to measure it in a cost-effective and consistent way has been something that we believe may have kind of hindered, adoption to this point. So again, this whole educational phase of air quality we skipped when we hit COVID. So most people are not aware of what exists below dust. People think about clean air as dust free. However, the image here on the screen kind of shows us everything beyond that. And an interesting point here is if I handed you a salt shaker and said, Aaron, just grab me one of those. It would take you a little bit of time to grab it, but very small, and that's 60 microns. For reference, the filtration standard of 0.3, you're going to have, probably dozens of those fit into 1 grain of salt, and then think about the impact as you go down to 0.007. So we spend a lot of time kind of at least explaining what you can't see might surprise you.
And Aaron, I would lean on this because making the invisible visible is a huge part of what we have to do to help educate on this. We have created handheld, low-cost air quality monitors, not permanent ones, but ones that a professional can use to measure air quality to show before and after. And I think that is the most impactful component where you can't just speak to it, but in a real world application, we can show it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I guess my thought back to our, we talked about it's called HVAC, but often they don't offer you a solution for the ventilation or filtration part of it. Is that something that you're seeing subcontractors in the industry start to deploy?
Not at the speed that we think they should. And a big conundrum that 20 years I've been in this market is you would think that HVAC professionals would be the tip of the spear providing and talking about those solutions. It just has not developed that way. And it could be their business models, it could be the way they go to market. We're seeing, of course, a shift, but not nearly what's needed to really improve the overall health of the population. With the MAHA movement going on now, it's what can we remove from our foods and from our water and from our air that are doing this tremendous amount of damage to our health. And I think that with that advent and the more adoption and acceptance, you'll see a lot more of that. But a lot of times HVAC are looking for the path of least resistance, not the best solution. So I could go again on a diatribe on that, but it is changing, not fast enough. And we believe the builders who get to say, this is what's going into my high performance home, just like they would their fixtures, or their design or the flooring, they get to decide that, and they get to be the tip of the spear to make sure that
Yeah.
their homes are healthy and are high performing.
Great. Thank you.
So, Aaron, do you have a ducted system at home?
Yes.
Do you know what kind of filter you use? What MERV rating?
Well, I mean, I'll be the the person here, but I have, I believe, a MERV 15 filter in,
Okay.
but I have a system that is not rated for that. So I know I'm having some stack effect
Yep.
on my furnace. I tend to compensate a little bit by changing it very frequently.
Which
And
is
then,
which is perfectly fine. However, what's really interesting is you're by far in the minority. You happen to work in space, and you probably know a guy, so you at least know that there is a trade-off that you hit. So
that's right.
a lot of people look at this, they hear it all day. We've all been in the Home Depot aisles. A lot of us spend a lot more time thinking about it at work than at home. And I know that to be true because every person I speak to ends up coming up in conversation. But the key takeaway is as MERV rating goes up, your capture efficiency increases. That's great. COVID hits, everybody throws a MERV 15 or whatever the most expensive filter they can find on the shelf, much to their HVAC technician's nightmare.
That's right. Yeah.
Because they've now got a frozen coil, they don't have airflow, etc. Right. So the good news is we solve for the problem, right? So along with that efficiency, you also get static pressure because it takes a lot of resistance to capture those fine particles, because otherwise we would just throw a HEPA filter in our furnace or our air handler and move on about our day. So what we've worked long and hard on is how do I get very high capture efficiency through media blends, filtration technologies, etc., without sacrificing my pressure drop. So we're going to talk a little bit about our products, but what's interesting is our Super V, for instance, has 98% capture at 0.3 microns, but the static pressure of 0.27 inches, which is what you would see normally from a passive media blend of like MERV 11 or MERV 13. That same filter has a filter life of up to 36 months. So now I've got low maintenance, low pressure drop, high efficiency. Obviously that works very well. But what we get into is now I need to trade off with space. So MERV goes up, I capture better, and I strain that motor and blower a little bit more. Healthway has been long at work on how do I kind of help bridge those two things together.
That's great.
What's really interesting is MERV 13 is what I hear a lot. That's what the CDC and the EPA kind of referenced. Hey, why don't you move up to MERV 13? That guidance was submitted not because MERV 13 is the best. However, in most situations, it's what that system can handle. And then it also comes down to what are we managing to. So if I'm managing the PM 2.5 and I'm looking to minimize pressure drop, MERV 13 is good enough. For my family, for my home, for my infant, for my aging family member, 50% personally wouldn't be good enough for me. I'd want to go a little bit higher. So
he was going to say mother-in-law on there, but then said, well, maybe not.
Yeah, we had to keep it somewhat straight.
Keep it family friendly here, right?
That's right. We're here to clean air and tighten up families. But no,
Brian, is the general rule that I mean, I really like the data you had on that. 1 million houses, 70% say, yeah, I got to be healthy, but then, only 70%, they just are dropping in a filter, right?
Yeah.
And is the general rule that we almost always want to go with a pleated style, deeper filter? Is that kind of where our head should be at, that the days of just trying to drop in a standard filter on the left, that's kind of gone. We need to be thinking about enhanced media, which has none of the I'm going to get it wrong. I keep saying stack effect. It's not. It's
static
pressure drop. Yeah. So the enhanced media, but really you exactly have it circled here, and I didn't even know this slide was next. But where we want to be thinking is at the de minimis for the homes that we build. I want enhanced media or I want premium electronic air control, right?
So yes, and then let me bring another factor in, because
Hmm.
COVID has in, inserted a little bit of an eye roll on health and wellness and indoor air quality, if I'm being honest, right? I call it COVID fatigue. In the end, it increased awareness, but you know, it's created a little bit of fatigue on wanting to actually learn about the solution. So home maintenance. If you have a 1-inch filter, there's a good chance you're having to change that monthly or quarterly, and there's a good chance you're not doing it. So from, you know, a turnover perspective, when you hand the keys to your new homeowner, or for Aaron, for you yourself, if you're like me, you're traveling pretty often, you have a lot of things you have to figure out. 1-inch filter, there are very good 1-inch filters. However, that decreased surface area is going to reduce the amount of actual capture you can do in its gram holding weight, which means you're going to have to change it more frequently or
Hmm.
sacrifice efficiency.
Right.
So
Brian, could
for
I add something to that too?
yeah, yeah.
Is, you know, a filter is a filter, but a filter inside of a system is very different. Now, we all know the standard filter is going to have a cardboard frame, air bypass, air takes the path of least resistance. The reason, you know, we look at a sealed filter system is to make sure all the air goes through that unit. And that's an important factor that you just won't also get with a standard filter. So it may be rated MERV 13, but in application, is it actually producing that?
Very
99%
good
of the
point.
time it's not.
Very good point. I know no one on this call has accidentally shoved that cardboard filter in to the point where it bends and now you have air escape. But it's very common. You have a little bit of a filter guide within that
Hmm.
frame itself. But what you're seeing is a lot of the manufacturers of equipment themselves obviously, you know, have offerings of what I would call an enhanced media filter option.
Hmm.
And then you get into, you know, what would be the premium product, which we play very well in as well, which is electronic air cleaners. So if I had to guess, Aaron, 60 to 70% of the homes are in column one,
Hmm.
25 to 30 are probably in column two, and then you probably have 10% of the market going to the ultra premium product offerings.
Makes sense. But again, I think what we want to see, right, is like 70% move into the box, right?
I think so. Um,
And
if
I think as you mentioned, what we want to see is perhaps this isn't going to come from our subcontractor, that we as the builder or our homeowners need to drive the conversation to say, I want this feature in my home
Correct.
because I love my mother-in-law.
I'm
well,
also, you know, and we talked about earlier, if you just bought, I think the average now 12 to 15,000 for a new HVAC system,
Mhm.
protecting that investment, making sure the coil, which is where most of the issues can come from, are
Mhm.
protected. It's also protecting the investment of the home, of the ducts. If you don't want to clean your ducts every 3 years because it build up, if you have better filtration, all of those things are alleviated, better performance of the systems that are inside the home as well.
Yeah.
and
Amen.
catering to the audience, if you remember, Ryan talked about like comfort and wellness on the left hand side of that screen, and on the right hand it was system performance. So if I'm able to cater to both audiences in the form of a differentiated product and say, listen, I'm providing you best in class indoor air quality, it's going to help you with your family, your wellness, your goals on the fitness side of things, as well, it's going to maintain your investment in your property, is going to lower your maintenance cost, and the total life cycle ownership, including your utility cost, will go down through this offering. Now we've spoke to both sides of the equation. What's
Right.
really nice about the area where we play in, Aaron, is it's health and wellness, but it's also system performance. And we
Hmm.
feel it's very important to satisfy both. I make the joke of, if I walk into a home and I'm trying to convince someone to invest in this, and you have an engineer husband and a yoga instructor wife, or vice versa, it's 2025, you have to be able to speak to both sides. And we
Hmm.
feel our technology does do that.
Great.
So again, this is just talking about the industry as a whole. There's three different approaches, and we talked about the MERV ratings within. And then obviously you have trade-offs. As you get into our enhanced media, we'll talk a little bit more about what type of filter media is actually being utilized and some of the benefits. So, we will obviously not miss an opportunity to talk about our own products, but hopefully this is kind of helpful to kind of frame what's actually in the market as well. So within our inline whole home category of equipment, we basically have what we call two full product families. So we have Super V on the left-hand side, which is our electronic air cleaner. This is the same technology we've been building for well over 10 years. It's technology that we've been utilizing in both our portable, our commercial, our fan filter units, those hospitals, those clean rooms that we referenced, but it's been put into a form factor that works more in a ducted system. So big V-bank media, electronically enhanced technology, 14 inches in direction of air, and it's at 98% capture. So very high efficiency, very low pressure drive, very long filter life. As you get into how am I designing for a system, the trade-offs I would have would be you have a bulkier unit, a bit more of a complex install, which requires trade coordination. And then obviously it costs more because it provides more value. On the right-hand side, we have our Healthway Home Defender HD, where we've taken a lot of the learnings we've had from electronically enhanced media designs, and we've applied it into a more passive media filter. So what does that mean? A very good filter in a smaller space that lasts a lot longer. And we've got two different versions. You have a MERV 13 with VOC, which means we have activated carbon, which helps remove the gases that Ryan spoke about. So when it gets into Healthway, our minimum filter efficiency is a MERV 13, and we've went ahead and added activated carbon with it to help solve for the VOC odor control portion of the equation. And then we have MERV 16 when you get into allergies, ultrafine particles, that's above 95% efficiency at 0.3. So when we say settle for the best, our lowest level is going to be a MERV 13 with VOC.
Nice. And the one on the right, that's a 4-inch.
That's a 4-inch media filter, and that cabinet itself is actually 6 inches.
And the Super V on the left, what kind of space are we looking at?
That's 14 inches, and that normally requires like a ducted transition or on a plenum box. On the right-hand side, what really helps, in a space constrained application is we've got 5 different sizes that actually fit the dimensions of your furnace and air handler. So it's being actually attached directly to the unit instead of fabricated transitions, ductboard, etc. So if you're in New England and you have a large basement, you have an open air return on a furnace, the Super V is no problem. If you're in a small 2,000 square foot home where your ducted system and your air handlers in a closet, obviously you're going to be space constrained and you might be moving more towards an HD. And then, feedback from, the technicians we work with is obviously they love the Super V where they have space, but in those space constrained applications, they want something that fits directly to the unit.
Nice.
And I've got some install pictures here at the end that we can kind of go through. But comparing the two products, I mentioned the 5 sizes. Basically 80% of furnaces and AHUs are going to probably be between that 16 by 20 on up to that 20 by 25. That 6-inch depth and direction of airspace makes for a much easier install. We've got a lot of form, fit, and function designs on pre-drilled holes, mounting gaskets, as well as kind of mounting tabs to kind of help an installer make a more secure transition. It's 18 gauge steel, it's powder coated. This is a very robust filter. A lot of concerns on the marketplace are the filter frames and boxes you see might be out of thin gauge aluminum. They are more prone to bending. The filter itself is wrapped in a rigid resin frame instead of a chipboard or carbon that can bend. And the reason we do that is we want to be able to support the weight of the system. We want to be able to gasket it to make 100% airtight to make sure that filter is performing at the level that we want. And then we had to incorporate all the things to make it easy. Recessed door handles, magnetized door keeps to avoid the frame being bent over time. So a lot of time, effort, and energy has been put into place to make this trade friendly and high performance.
Brian, I would add too, especially with the current concerns, these are made at our upstate New York facility. So tariffs, those type of concerns, I think that helps, knowing that it is made domestically.
You read my mind, Ryan. That was just my question. Like, tell us where it's made and are we paying? And I don't know if we're paying 30%. I guess today we're paying 30% tariffs instead of 145. So that's
But it's still
better.
early in the day, so just stand by, Aaron.
Yeah, but it's coming out of New York. That's great.
Yeah. Our headquarters is in Pulaski, New York, just north of Syracuse. Been there for over 30 years. It's the home of the Super V and the home of the launch of the Home Defender HD. So
Nice.
East Coast centric. And for today, not a major impact on tariffs, which is nice.
Great.
I'll shift over just on the Super V side. This is the way I envision is a good, better, best offering, Aaron. You have standard filtration, you have your enhanced media blend, and then you have electronic air cleaner. The Super V itself, it's the same technology that we've been talking into clean rooms, those hospitals that we mentioned, large high rises, Midtown Manhattan. We have million CFM jobs with the same technology that we've used. However, it's just been adapted to a residential form factor.
Yeah.
So,
and
that unit is currently used in Procter & Gamble's innovation labs, Rockefeller buildings, had numerous hospital systems. The list goes on. And again, the same exact technology, slightly different form factor.
Yeah. And is that Super V? I remember the electrostatic filter. And again, maybe when I see that, I think of the old electrostatic. Can you help correct me on when I'm looking at that box? Or am I I know there's a filter in there, but is it also doing electrostatic?
Yeah, electrostatic, what you're probably thinking of are the plates, right? Plated materials that is correct. We are not using that. We have made that technology. Matter of fact, we were making that solution for bowling alleys in the 80s when you could smoke indoors. And electrostatic or that technology is very, very good on day one, but on day three, it's over because the plates get coated.
That's
So
right.
I think you could probably glean that the development of the DFS technology is a marriage of what UV, electrostatic, filtration, et cetera, combined. So it's not that technology at all, but because of the enhancement, sometimes people do equate it to that.
Great. And we had just had a question come in on rough price. I think you can just give us a retail price, but
$1 million. No, I think we can get into that towards the end, and it depends on the size and the one you're looking for. But I think what most people are going to find that it's unbelievably affordable, especially at the time of construction to do. And there's a little bit of variables that we can help get into.
Yeah. Or again, I would still say, Ryan, we talked about this before, like have a plan for your own house. And this is like the curse of my house is I spend time with all you great suppliers. And then, my wife wants a new couch and I'm like, yeah, but I need to buy one of these instead. But you're going to do it. It's like, have a plan. You're going to do it anyway, right? You're getting a new furnace. Don't forget to add the filtration system, right?
Agreed.
The travel mentality, I always reference, I spent $7 on a bottle of water at the airport because it was filtered. Then you're going to go home and say you don't want to spend more than $8 on an air filter, right? We're missing our priorities in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
The other interesting point here, and I skipped over it, but you had a question, Aaron, about should we just use that standard pleated media? When you look at those 1-inch filters, what you see is a relatively low level V-bank, right? They're shallow, they're a bit gradual, you can kind of see through it. On the Home Defender HD, that's actually a mini pleat blend. So within that 4-inch filter media, what you'll see is a lot of ridges going back and forth. And what that results in is I have roughly 50 square feet of media within that filter. So what that allows me to do is have a high level of gram holding weight, which allows us to get that long filter life. But it's actually, it's a synthetic blend, meaning, a fair amount of R&D spent into how do we get that ultrafine capture at a low level and get the surface area and blend it all in. So when people try to compare what a Home Defender HD costs versus what they saw on the shelf, it may be because we have, 5 to 10x the media within that filter as well. So construction aside, the components, the powder coat steel, the 18 gauge versus aluminum is a very robust unit. And I think that's important. People want to know they're buying equipment, not accessories. And that's something we hang our hat on.
Great.
I think just like the other technologies, there's trade-offs within our own product offering. And again, we also manufacture portable air purifiers, which supplement a home greatly. But obviously in the construction space, in the new home, we're certainly going, whole home. So that MERV 13 carbon, very high capture, as a rule of thumb compared to, MERV 14 and below. But what we did is where we have a relatively low MERV option, we wanted to make sure we address the VOC concern. So you hear a lot about new homes on what does off-gassing mean? Volatile organic compounds. What kind of cleaning am I doing? If I'm using luxury vinyl plank in a room, I have new carpet and I have that new couch you mentioned, what's going into my air? So those gases don't get filtered within a media, they actually have to be absorbed. And that's where activated, carbon comes into play. So on our MERV,
Brian, if I could hit on that just a little bit more, I think all the conversation right now, both in water and air, is PFAS, right? PFAS is a forever chemical. It is found now in 99.9% of all people. And it's basically the vast majority comes from a fire retardant, which every piece of furniture, from your baby crib to your couch to your carpeting, has to have a fire retardant applied to it. So this is one of the big contributing factors on the VOC front into an indoor space.
So in a home where we're looking to address what might be a harmful gas or odors, obviously the MERV 13 with carbon is a phenomenal solution. You're well above what most standard filtration is in the home, and you're getting the added benefit of carbon. As you move into the MERV 16 standard requires 95% above on 0.3 microns. Obviously, we're there on ours. When you think about an allergy-friendly home, you're going to see that in hotels, you're going to see that in doctors' offices. For a sensitive clientele, immunocompromised, the MERV 16 is a no-brainer. All things equal, we have 5 different sizes. That static pressure you mentioned ends up being roughly the same across the mix, although they tweak. Where the MERV 13 stays the same is because of that carbon, where we've added additional media on the MERV 13. And of course, I'm not capturing for the VOCs. You see at the bottom, none of these are solving for CO2, but Aaron, you've mentioned ERVs and the adoption within the performance home building space. This becomes a complementary suite of products to kind of provide that whole solution. So
I think it goes back to your slide where you said, dilution is the most important, and then filtration, or I would say the most important, but dilution is one of the big categories. You still have to dilute. But then
Aaron, actually, the EPA says #1 source control. Somebody here, I think, chatted a German Shepherd that sheds a lot. Source control would be, we're never going to get rid of our pets, but it's getting rid of visible mold, reduction of other things in this space. Ventilation's #2, and this isn't in order, but ventilation is very important if the AQI allows for it. And we know that HRVs and ERVs have limited filtration, MERV 13 at best. So bringing air from outside that's maybe not fully filtered is sometimes problematic. And the third thing is use air purification. So, ventilation, dilution, and air purification are 2 products and mechanisms that a home builder could apply to their homes to solve for those issues.
Yeah. Is there, and I have cat fur. Hopefully you can't see it. I have cat fur all over my shirt here, but I'm my sympathies to the German Shepherd owner. But what does that do? How do we think about filtration life in terms of pet count? Gord Cook always tells me he had this dog Rocky, and his dog came in to watch the Stanley Cup once a year, and then he went back outside. Today we have fur babies that live inside with us all the time. How does that impact how we think about that filter life?
Aaron, we shed more than most animals, believe it or not. Most of the little
Really?
dust and debris we see, a lot of that's human skin
Uh,
and then dust mites and things that fall from that. Um, if you have a small zoo in your home, if your spouse is bringing home every stray they find, you may need to change the filters a little bit more frequently.
okay.
But I think for 99% of the applications out there, when we say 1 year filter life on the Home Defenders and 3 year on
Hmm.
the Super V, I think that's pretty standard across the board. Now,
Hmm.
we use that at about 50% duty cycle, understanding that most HVAC systems are not running 24/7. We do
Hmm.
recommend when you have this type of quality product installed that you at least have some type of mechanism where every 15 minutes of the hour it is filtering, whether you're calling for heating or cooling.
Hmm.
Um, but again, it is indicative if you cook a lot of ethnic food that has delicious taste and phenomenal aroma, you might need to change that carbon filter
Hmm.
slightly more frequently. But
Hmm.
99% of the time, again, that's 1 year on the HDs and 3 years on the Super V.
Great. Thank you.
And,
And
in
I
practice,
know we have more slides, but it makes me think of the question, does an increase in filtration necessarily mean increase in energy use for the home?
Yeah, I would say typically, and the reason we have won so much in commercial is that if you increase filtration, you almost always have an energy penalty. With our
Hmm.
technology, we account for that. So our success in all these other applications is for the first time, you can achieve greater than MERV 16 filtration without the pressure drop, without the extra energy load. Residential, it is a factor, but not nearly as much as it is on commercial. So that is the secret sauce to our technology is that it is providing the best in class filtration at the lowest possible energy penalty.
Okay.
and
Thank you.
when you talk payback analysis on multifamily or commercial, it's that total cost of ownership at the homeowner level. If somebody's paying 15 cents a kWh, the actual cost of filtration is not so much of a burden. However, the maintenance cost, the actual replacement value, having to do it once a month, and when you don't do it, what impacts your system once the coil freezes, it's kind of that foregone maintenance that I think a lot of that benefit kind of comes out. So it's just a different calculus that I
Hmm.
think comes into play. I'll show a couple pictures of installs. I talked about the Super V having extremely high efficiency. It is relatively flexible from an install perspective, as you can imagine. Being an upstate New York manufacturing facility, we have a fair amount of install base in the northern end of the United States. But if you have a basement on a downflow return, you still have to make sure you have a ducted transition and airtight, but the whole goal is making sure that air being cleaned is happening before it hits the coil and then on the supply side of the system. So that can be a vertical orientation, that can be horizontal, that may be on a downflow, a horizontal install, or a drop return that you see here on the right hand side.
Hmm.
14 inches in direction of airflow. That door itself pulls off towards us. And if you see there's an actual cord. So from a trade coordination perspective, we have to make sure electricity is running to that unit. That's that blue indicator light acknowledging that the system is live and ready. And then we
Hmm.
need to make sure we have enough space where that filter can come out towards us. So that's roughly another 20 inches needed for that filter return to us for actual changeouts.
Something to
As
highlight there too, Aaron, based on your question on energy, is that
Yeah.
this is only activated from energy when there's airflow to it. It's not a 24/7 activated system, only when there's air being called for.
Okay.
Yeah. And the consumption of the system is something like 7 watts. So inconsequential.
Hmm.
on the HD, obviously we've gone from 14 inches to just over 6. So 5 different sizes, matching the outer diameter of those air handlers and furnaces with a much more flexible install capability. So same configuration, same concept. The key is very good effective filter with very low air escape. And the Home Defender helps open up a lot of doors here in this area for us. So that's kind of our story, Aaron. Hopefully, it helps frame, a little education on indoor air quality itself. We think the consumer awareness as well as current market conditions prevent a very nice mutual opportunity for us in the home builder network. Obviously, being part of a great organization like EEBA, we think networking is a big part of this, and hopefully this helps us drive awareness on what opportunity might hit. So I encourage, if anybody has any information, they're happy to contact us here at sales@healthway.com, and obviously we can coordinate offline as well.
Well, I think we'll go back to the question we started with, which is, why isn't everyone doing this? I mean, I think that I keep hearing, and it's from builders and from homeowners, that the most important thing to them is health. The reason they buy a high performance home is they perceive it to be a healthier home. So why aren't we all doing that? And that being said, then maybe the second part of the question is, if we decide to do it, how do we activate that? You know, Obviously we want this trade coordination with our HVAC contractor, and want to get that put in from the word go on it. So those are my two kind of questions there of,
Aaron, I think that's the big unknown is why aren't we? My inclination that it's not understanding the right product or opportunity to have the right impact. That's why
Mhm.
we're here, making sure that the education first and foremost is available, and then the knowledge on how to apply it. Given our track record in some of the markets, we've done this with numerous builders and helping them navigate that trade engagement. I think we have a good recipe for that, a very simple process. And it is just about letting them know up front that we want this HVAC equipment installed, this ERV with this filtration device.
Mhm.
So there's some simplicities there, some things that over the last few years we've worked out. And again, I think it's just not being introduced to the right product at the right time, and timing is
Mhm.
everything. So hopefully, Aaron, especially with the group of the high performance builders, that we can start to seriously look at that, work with some pilot projects, start to showcase our solution and how to market it. So it's not
Yeah.
just saying we're a high performance home and doing air filtration, and saying we're a high performance and wellness home that incorporates air purification, water purification, etc., to improve
Mhm.
the well-being of not just the home, but the occupants as well. And having the right collaterals and verbiage and information to be able to communicate that.
Yeah. So
I think that
Brian,
coordination
yeah.
piece is huge. Sorry to jump in, but where we've seen it be successful, take a lot what we learn on the commercial space. It means the same thing, certain on new construction, on residential, is generally you have the builder, the client, the designer, and the installing contractor, right? So those should be partnerships. If the demand is being driven from the builder, the collaboration between engineering and architects, as well as the installing contractor upfront, I think ensures, a lot of good downstream efficiency. If it's something being thrown in at the last minute without coordination, it's not going to be successful. So when you get it into the show home, you're getting it talked about, it's being selected, it's been planned for, we've designed the systems. Those are the right things over time.
Yeah.
Certainly with the Super V, the Home Defender makes it a little bit more of a midstream adoption capability. But when
Mhm.
in doubt, you want all those partners, you know, um, agreeing and putting their hands together, making sure there's going to be a successful install. And the ones we've seen go well do that. And I think that's a big key part of it.
Yeah. Let's go back to price. And if you can, tell me the price of the two, but also I remember when I first met you, I think I met Ryan at a show, and we talked about the standalone unit too. So, I listen to this and I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm freaked out. Like, I don't know when I'm going to change my furnace. I know I need to do something more, but give me the price of, hey, here's our standalone unit. It's awesome. You should put this in your bedroom. And then of the other two products that we talked about, what can we think about in terms of rough list pricing?
Yeah, I think if we talk list pricing, which doesn't incorporate labor or
Yeah.
install, if you look at a Super V, that's roughly going to be $2,500. The Home Defender HD is probably going to be sold more at like a 750, 800. The level of complexity on install, you add a couple hours, from there, plus ducted transitions. What's interesting is we do standalone equipment that range everything from $600 list up to 3,000,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're on the high end on what I would call the supplemental in home on the portable side. But to buy a $600 unit for all 5 bedrooms or a living room and your upstairs and all of that, it gets quite expensive. So when you can start to look at it as like a total suite, that's when you can kind of start to justify what that whole home solution starts to look like, I think.
There,
Yeah.
and when you look at that too, if as a builder, let's say it is a Super V, suggested list price is 2,500. Your contractor's putting in the HVAC. It's no addition, very little additional
Yeah.
time
I wouldn't
when
think
you
so.
add in at that point.
Right.
So for the grand scheme of the cost of the home for that type of filtration is just powerful.
Yeah.
Very welcome. Thanks for the nice comment.
Yeah. No, kudos from Jennifer and lots of great comments today. Um, will you be at the EBA Summit this fall, September 17th? Can people see you there as well?
That
Great.
I believe we're booked. I'm not
Yeah,
100%, but yes,
I think
we
you
will
are.
be very visible moving forward.
Yeah.
So lots of
Oh, it's
opportunity
great.
for questions and engagement.
But yeah, reach out. I mean, I think the thing that always piques our group is you guys said demo units and beta test and model home programs. I mean, if you've got the number, I think it was sales at healthway.com. Reach out to Ryan and Brian there. And this, of course, will be on the EBA webinar and podcast coming up in our learning management system. But we're looking forward to seeing everyone this fall. It's our most beautiful month in Minneapolis, so we're excited to have you all here. So I look forward to seeing you guys then.
Aaron, thanks so much for hosting this
You
and the EVA
bet. That was great.
organization and for everyone that joined. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Brian, thank you as well.
Thank you all.